poor relatives eat in the kitchen, my brother sneered. I just smiled, pulled out my phone, dialed my bank, and said, "Cancel the $25 million loan." He went pale. That's when it hit him he'd just insulted the man who actually owned Meridian. I'm James Wilson. I'm 38. And this happened at our family's annual Easter dinner, where my own brother told me and my partner that we had to eat in the kitchen with the staff because, in his eyes, we were the poor relatives. Before I get to how that one sentence detonated a $25 million loan and wrecked my family's entire real estate empire, drop where you're watching from in the comments. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. It was one of those perfect spring days in Greenwich, Connecticut, the kind that feels like it was designed in a lab for rich people. The sun was shining, the dogwood trees were blooming, and the air smelled like cut grass and old money. My family's estate, where I always felt like a guest, not family, was humming with the kind of elegant energy rich people carry around like cologne. The driveway was stacked with luxury cars. Men in tailored suits and women in pastel dresses laughed on the lawn, champagne flutes in hand. David, my partner, and I walked up the stone path. He squeezed my hand. "You sure about this, James?" he asked, his voice low. "We can still turn around. Hit Miller's. Grab a steak. No one's gonna know we didn't show." I shook my head, forcing a small smile. "No, I have to do this. If I don't show, they'll say I'm bitter or jealous. I just want to get through it. Hold my head up. Prove to myself their opinion doesn't matter anymore." Famous last words. Inside, the house looked flawless. Of course it did. Massive floral arrangements on polished mahogany tables. The smell of roasted lamb mixing with my mother's perfume, which probably cost more than my first car, she greeted. U.S. with a quick, barely there kiss on the cheek. "James." "David." "You made it," she said. Her smile never touched her eyes. My father, Richard Wilson, who could shut down a boardroom with a single word, gave me a handshake as brief as a blink. "James," that was it. Then came Michael, my brother, strutting over with that same smirk he's worn since we were kids. He's the golden child, the heir to Wilson Properties, the one who could do no wrong. His wife, Vanessa, latched onto his arm, scanning me and David like we were furniture from last season. "James, little brother, glad you could make it," Michael said, every word dipped in condescension. "Dinner's starting. Main guests are in the dining room." He paused, waited, then grinned. "You and David can head to the kitchen? There's a table set up in there." I blinked. My brain actually stalled, trying to process it. The kitchen, with the staff. David's hand clamped down on mine, knuckles white. I felt the blood drained from my face. "What did you just say?" I asked, voice low, sharp. Michael chuckled, that ugly, smug kind of laugh. He leaned in like he was letting me in on a joke. "Poor relatives eat in the kitchen," he said, just loud enough for a few guests nearby to hear. "It's better this way. Don't want you feeling out of place." And in that moment, I didn't snap. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I froze. All those years of being overlooked, dismissed, treated like an afterthought, they didn't come rushing in with rage. They condensed into one single, cold, focused moment of clarity. I looked past him, past my mother's passive smile, past my father's silent nod of agreement. I didn't see family anymore. I saw a bad business partner. I smiled, slowly, deliberately. The kind of smile that didn't quite feel like mine. "You know what, Michael?" I said calmly. "You're right." Then I took up my phone. Now, before I tell you what I did with it, you have to understand this wasn't about one dinner. It was about a lifetime. 1,000 tiny moments that finally bled me dry of any hope that things might ever change. I remember being 15, standing in the giant living room, heart racing. It was the night of my high school's science and arts fair. I'd just won first prize in economics for this insanely detailed market prediction model. It wasn't just a school project hit, it was something I'd poured myself into. My father stood by the fireplace, scotch in hand, chatting with some business guy. I waited for a lull, then stepped up, holding my ribbon and summary sheet. Dad? I said, voice cracking a bit. I won first place. He glanced at the paper. Scanned it for maybe a second. Oh, that's nice, son. Then he turned right back to his guest, and just then, Michael came bursting in, muddy and covered in grass, holding a cheap plastic trophy. Dad! We won! We made regionals! He yelled. My father's face lit up. He clapped Michael on the back, let out this huge laugh. That's my boy. See that, Frank? A real competitor. That's the Wilson spirit. He didn't even notice me slipping away. My blue ribbon, my detailed market model. Just nice. Michael's muddy football trophy. That was Wilson's spirit. That was always the pattern. Michael was the tangible one. The athlete. The heir. The one who played by the Wilson blueprint. I was the abstract kid. The one buried in books and numbers. The outlier. When I got into MIT for finance and economics, they barely blinked. Sophomore year, I called home. My dad didn't ask about school. He just spent 10 minutes hyping Michael's new internship at Wilson Properties. He's a natural, James, my dad said. Understands people. Land? What's real? That finance stuff you're doing, it's just numbers, not a real business. When are you coming home? There's a place for you here. You can work under your brother. Work under my brother. I was crushing some of the toughest econ theory courses in the country, and he wanted me to be Michael's assistant. I told him I was happy where I was. Hung up. That night, I stayed in the library till 3 a.m., not because I had to, but because my work mattered. After graduation, I had a vision. A private lending firm. Fast, smart, innovative, better than the banks. I called it Meridian Financial. All I needed was seed money, just enough to rent a little office. Get licensed. So I did something that still stings. I put on my only decent suit, and I went to see my father in his cavernous, mahogany-paneled office in downtown Greenwich. I came armed with charts, projections, a detailed market analysis, my entire heart and soul laid bare in a business plan. I'd never worked harder on anything. He listened quietly, hands steepled in front of him, wearing that same unreadable expression he had at the science fair all those years ago. When I finally finished, he let out a short, sharp laugh. Not the warm kind. The kind that stings. James, he said, shaking his head, a lending firm. You want to gamble with other people's money? That's not building something. That's just moving paper around. Wilson's build. We create buildings. We make communities. We deal in brick and mortar.
That's legacy.
He stood and walked to the window, staring out over the city like some kind of monarch surveying his kingdom. I can't back this. It's too flimsy. Too risky. It's just not who we are. It wasn't just a no, it was a rejection of who I was. My dream, my plan, my identity. He didn't just shut the door on the investment. He shut the door on me. I walked out of that office feeling 2 inches tall. That night, everything changed. I met David not in person, but through an online startup forum. I'd posted something raw and desperate about the rejection. He messaged me privately. No pity, no coddling. Just, I've been there. Here's what worked for me. David was a tech entrepreneur who'd taken more than a few hits himself, but he saw something in my plan that my own father never could. He introduced me to an angel investor, a sharp, finance-savvy contact who wasn't afraid of ideas with teeth. That investor gave me the seed money, just enough to rent a tiny office, register the business, and get going. The first few years of Meridian were brutal. I worked out of a cramped, windowless room, survived on ramen and instant coffee. Every cent I made went back into the business. I remember the day we closed our first $1 million deal. I was over the moon. I preached about the importance of real assets. Now he had none, and he, the son who played with numbers, now owned them. The fall of the Wilson family was swift and final. The forced recall of the $25 million loan triggered a cascade. One by one, Their other debts defaulted. It was like pulling a thread on a tightly stitched seam. Everything unraveled. Wilson Properties went into a painful, very public restructuring. They were forced to sell off assets, lay off staff, and shrink the empire down to a shell of what it once was. Michael, the golden child, the one they thought had saved the company, was disgraced. Publicly, he was demoted, stripped of his titles, and became the walking embodiment of the family's arrogance and fall. About 4 months after the Easter dinner, I got a voicemail. Unknown number. I almost deleted it, but something made me listen. James? It's me. Michael? The voice was hollow. Fragile. Nothing like the man who sneered at me that night. The arrogance was gone, replaced with something defeated and unfamiliar. I know I have no right to call you, he said, but I wanted to say I'm sorry. There was a long pause, a shaky breath. What I did, what I said that night, there's no excuse. I was an idiot. A jealous, arrogant idiot. You were right. About everything. We all see it now. Another pause. Anyway, I just had to say that. Goodbye, James. He hung up. I stood there, phone in hand, unsure how to feel. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't satisfaction. It was just sadness for the brother I used to know, the friend he'd been when we were kids, before the poison of our family's legacy got to him. But the hardest moment came weeks later when my mother showed up at my apartment. Unannounced, the doorman called up. Against my better judgment, I told him to let her in. She looked older, smaller. The high society matriarch I'd grown up with had been replaced by someone tired and fragile. She didn't come to apologize. She came to plead. James, she said, her fingers twisting around the strap of her designer handbag. Your father, he's not well. The stress is killing him. And Michael, he's broken. You have to stop this. I'm not doing anything, Mom, I said softly. I'm just running my business. The rest, that's the fallout of your choices. But the house, she whispered, her voice cracking. The bank's threatening foreclosure. Our home, James? Your childhood home? Please. You have the money. You could fix this. You could save us. And then she let it slip. The real reason, the one that finally unlocked decades of confusion. Your father. He can be a hard man, she said, eyes welling with tears. But you don't understand. His brother Uncle Robert, the one we never talk about. He did the same thing. He left the family business to start something on his own, and he failed. Spectacularly. He lost everything. Brought shame on the family. She took a deep breath. Your father never recovered from that when you started down the same path, so independent, so ambitious. He was terrified. He thought he was watching it happen again. He pushed you away because he couldn't bear it. He thought he was protecting himself. I didn't respond. I just stared at her. It wasn't an excuse. Not even close. But it was something. An explanation. A tragic, twisted, deeply pathetic explanation. All this time, I thought they hated me for being ambitious, for being different, for succeeding on my own terms. But they weren't cruel out of malice. They were cruel out of fear. She saw the look on my face and pushed harder. Please, James. Just this one thing. Save the house for the family. That night, I talked it over with David. The thought of strangers living in that house, the creak of the floors, the smell of the old wood, the memories good and bad was almost unbearable. I could stop it. A trust, set up quietly. An anonymous purchase of the debt. Let them live there for the rest of their lives? It would be a small act. One I wouldn't even have to put my name on. What do you want to do? David asked. I thought about it long and hard. About my father's fear. My mother's desperation. Michael's apology. The cycle of dysfunction that defined our entire family tree. And I realized something. If I saved them now, they wouldn't be free. They'd be dependent on me. The son they cast out, the power balance would flip, but it wouldn't heal anything. They'd be shackled by gratitude, instead of pride. And that was just another prison. Nothing, I said finally. The word tasted foreign. I'm going to do nothing? David nodded slowly. Are you sure I am? And I meant it. I've been wrapped up in their fear for too long, buried under their expectations, crushed by their legacy. If I saved them now, I'd still be tangled in it. The only way to be free was to walk away. Completely. They needed to save themselves. It was the hardest decision of my life, but it was also the right one. Today, David and I are sitting on a beach in Hawaii. No calls, no meetings, just waves, sun, sand. It's been a year since that Easter dinner. A year that feels like a lifetime. Wilson Properties still exists, but just barely. A small, local firm now. Michael runs it, in name only. The Greenwich estate is gone. Last I heard, my parents moved into a modest condo nearby. I haven't spoken to them since. I don't know if I ever will. Some fractures don't heal. Some roots are too rotten to nourish anything. For years, I chased what I thought was success measured. My value in profits, deals, influence. I thought if I just accomplished enough, earned enough, built enough, they'd finally respect me. I spent years trying to earn a seat at a table I never truly belonged at. And that night, in their hallway, I thought power was being able to cancel a $25 million loan. Later, when my mother begged me to save them, I thought maybe power was the ability to rescue them. But I was wrong. Staring out at the vast Pacific, I finally understand what real wealth is. It's not the power to ruin. It's not the power to save. It's the power to walk away. To let go. To stop carrying the burden of fixing people who broke you. It's the quiet strength of knowing who you are without needing their validation. It's building your own table with your own rules. And surrounding yourself only with people who see you, who value you, who love you as you are. That kind of wealth. That's a legacy I'm proud to leave behind. Thanks for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, I'd love to hear yours. Have you ever had to choose yourself over family, over fear, over tradition? Drop it in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. There's more where this came from. Say anything and the deal falls through. Who do you think he'll blame? The son who delivered a $25 million miracle, or the CFO who couldn't keep his mouth shut? It was blackmail. Plain and simple. Arthur, a man who'd poured decades into the company, was being forced to choose between his ethics and his career. He chose the latter. He stayed quiet. So, as far as my parents knew, Michael was the hero, the prodigal son who somehow conjured a miracle out of thin air. They probably toasted to him that night, called him a genius, and all of this was bubbling underneath when that elegant Easter dinner invite showed up. I didn't know I was walking into a setup, into a powder keg, fuse already lit, holding the detonator without realizing it. Driving to the estate felt different this time. Usually, it came with anxiety, the kind you learn to swallow over a lifetime. But this time, I felt focused. Calm, like a man heading into one last meeting. David rode beside me, quiet. He knew this wasn't about confrontation. This was about closure. The moment we stepped inside, I felt the shift in the room.
Smiles.
We're too polite. Hugs too stiff. It wasn't a dinner, it was a theater performance. Everyone had a role. Before the appetizers were even served, my father pulled me aside near the grand piano. He had a glass of whiskey in hand, and, that familiar, looked like he was about to say something profound.
James, he said, swirling his drink.
I hear your firm's doing well, making a name for itself, and for just a second, something flickered in me. Maybe, just maybe, this was it. The moment he finally saw me. Yes, Dad, I said. It's been a strong year. He nodded slowly, took a sip.
Good.
Good. He stared out the window, eyes on the lawns. Just remember what's real. Land, buildings, assets you can touch. That's legacy. Then he turned to me. His gaze held a strange kind of pity. All those numbers on a screen? It's clever. Sure, but it's a game. Don't mistake that for something real. And just like that, the flicker of hope died. Same script, different day. I could build an empire out of nothing, and he'd still think it was make-believe. Got it, Dad, I said, voice flat. Later, I caught sight of Vanessa, Michael's wife, cornering David near the bar. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but her smile was pure. Sugar and David's expression was tight. I made my way over just in time to hear her say, "So, brave of you, David, being in such a volatile industry. All that tech stuff. Like a bubble, right? One little pop-oof." She mimed an explosion with her fingers. Must be nerve-wracking. David, who had recently sold his company for an amount that could buy and sell her entire life twice over, just smiled politely. We manage. Classic Vanessa, disguised disdain under a compliment's skin. Subtle, cutting, cruel. She wasn't just dismissing David. She was dismissing everything we'd built. Everything we were. And that was the second cut. Deeper this time. Because it hit someone I love. I placed a hand on David's back. "Everything okay here?" I asked. Vanessa's smile spread a little wider. "Oh, perfectly fine, James. I was just getting to know David better." She gave him a look that was anything but friendly, then glided away like a satisfied villain in a period drama. "David," exhaled slowly. "I see what you mean about this family," he muttered. "They're experts." Before dinner started in the grand dining room, I felt this strange pull, like something inside me needed space to breathe. I slipped away and made my way to the study, a room that had always felt like mine in a house where nothing else did. It smelled of old leather and dust and memories. I stood there, surrounded by shelves of forgotten books, and pulled out my phone. There was a calendar reminder I'd set that morning. Just 2 words. Clause 7. B. It was part of all Meridian's major loan agreements, a standard clause legal boilerplate, at a glance but powerful. It gave us the right to call the loan, to demand full repayment immediately if the borrower acted in bad faith or in a way that undermined the business relationship, a kind of nuclear option. One I had never once considered using, but after a bad experience a few years back, I'd had my legal team reinforce it. Ironclad failsafe. I didn't know why. I'd set the reminder. Maybe some quiet, unseen instinct had nudged me, a whisper in the background preparing me for war I didn't even know I was walking into. I slipped the phone back in my pocket, took a deep breath. All hope of reconciliation was gone. Burned to ash. I just wanted to get through the evening. Quietly. With dignity. Then walk away forever. As I stepped back into the hallway, I saw Maria, the family's longtime housekeeper, motioning for guests to move toward the dining room. She'd been there my entire life. Always kind. Always warm. She'd sneak me cookies when I was a kid. Hug me when no one else noticed I needed one. When she saw me, her face crumpled. Her eyes dropped. She looked ashamed. "Mr. James," she whispered. "Mr. Michael," he said. "For you and Mr. David." She didn't finish, just looked down the hallway, not toward the dining room, but the kitchen. That look in her eyes, that's what shattered me. Not because it was cruel, but because it wasn't. It was sympathy. It was sorrow. It was shame on my family's behalf. That was the third cut, and it was the deepest, because in Maria's pain, I saw the real ugliness of what my family had become. That's when Michael showed up. He had that look. That's gleeful. Triumphant, mean dash kid, dash on dash, the dash playground. Look, he was ready for the kill. The hallway to the kitchen felt like the longest walk of my life. The lights were dimmer. The carpets turned to tile. The smell of roast lamb faded into the cold, industrial scent of bleach and stainless steel. I could hear laughter and wine glasses clinking behind us, but it was muffled now, like we were slipping into another world. The world of the help. Maria walked in front of us, shoulders hunched, head down. She couldn't look at me. David walked beside me like a silent furnace. I could feel the fury coming off him in waves. But me, I felt nothing, just cold. Michael followed, practically bouncing, soaking in every second. At the swinging door to the kitchen, he finally stopped. "Right. Through here," he said, loud enough for the kitchen staff to hear. "We've set up a nice little table for you, right by the service entrance." Convenient. I turned and looked at him. Whatever hollow space I'd felt before was gone. Something had settled there now. Something sharp. Something final. "Why are you doing this, Michael?" I asked. My voice wasn't pleading, just curious. I truly wanted to understand the scale of his cruelty. He gave that same disgusting laugh from earlier. "I told you," he said, leaning in, reeking of expensive wine. "Poor relatives eat in the kitchen. It's a family rule I just invented." Then he looked me over like I was dirt beneath his shoes. His voice dropped. "You might have your little firm, little brother, but in this house, in this world, you're still nothing. You left. You bailed on the family business. Thought you were better than us." He gestured around with a flourish. "Well, look where you are now. In the kitchen, where you belong." Then he said the one thing that sealed everything. "Besides, someone has to be here to thank the staff. They're working hard to serve the important people. People like me. The one who just saved this family with a $25 million deal your little paper-pushing company could only dream of." He was gloating, holding my money in front of me like it was his. That was it. The cold in me didn't crack it. Calcified, turned into something precise. "Surgical."
I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just turned and looked into the kitchen.
The staff were frozen, pretending not to hear. Maria was watching me with tears in her eyes. I turned back to Michael, and I smiled. A real smile this time.
Not polite.
Not performative. Liberated? "You know what, Michael?" I said, voice calm and quiet. "You're absolutely right. Thank you for making everything so clear." I pulled out my phone. Moved slow, deliberate, like I'd rehearsed it 1,000 times. David looked confused, concern beginning to crease his face. Michael, still smug, probably assumed I was calling an Uber or taking a selfie to remember my humiliation. I opened my encrypted messaging app, tapped into my drafts. I had a message there, a pre-written order. A contingency for disaster. The recipient? My head of legal? The content? Simple, cold, final. I hovered my thumb over the send button. Time stopped. In that moment, I saw everything my whole life in freeze frames. The science fair, the crushed dreams, the study, the toast I gave at Michael's wedding, the tie, smiles, the dismissals, the silence. All of it. This was the end. I pressed send. The message vanished with a soft whoosh. Michael was still grinning. "What are you gonna do? Call your therapist? Write a sad blog post?" "Something like that," I said, slipping the phone back into my pocket. "Let's go, Davia. I've lost my appetite." We turned to leave. Got maybe 5 steps before it happened. A ping. Not loud, but sharp. Distinct. From the direction of the dining room. Then a chair scraped. A low, confused murmur, and my father's voice, sharp and rattled. "What in God's name is this?" We stopped. Michael's smirk faltered. "It's a legal notice," my father said, voice rising, tinged with panic. "From MF Capital." Silence. It says, "They're calling the loan. Effective immediate. Full repayment demanded." The room exploded into gasps. Wine glasses clinked down hard. Silverware froze mid-air. The hum of conversation evaporated. Dead silence. Michael's face went sheet white. His eyes darted. Michael's eyes darted. Around, wild and panicked. "What? No, that's impossible. There has to be a mistake," he stammered. Then he looked at me, and the desperation hit full force. "What did you do?" I turned to face him, David still beside me, steady and calm like a lighthouse in the storm. I let the silence linger, let it stretch out and wrap itself around. The moment, like a noose. I wanted him to feel it. The weight of it. The collapse. Then I spoke. Quiet, but clear enough to carry straight into the heart of the stunned dining room. "There's no mistake, Michael," I said. MF Capital is a subsidiary I use for certain deals. His face blanched. My father appeared in the doorway, eyes wide and disbelieving. My mother's hand flew to her mouth like she was trying to physically hold in the reality of what she was hearing. And then, calmly, I gave them the last piece. Its full name is Meridian Financial. And Meridian is mine. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was deafening. A silence so complete it became a presence in the room. You could hear the blood pounding in your ears. You could feel the air shift. A silence where entire lives broke open. Michael stood frozen, as if he'd turned to stone. My father looked at me like he couldn't comprehend the board just flipped, and the pawn. He thought Expendable had just called checkmate. Leaving that house felt like emerging from a tunnel you didn't realize you'd been trapped in. The air was different, sharper, freer. David and I walked down the long stone path. Nothing said between us, because there was nothing left to say. The silence we left behind said it all. Guests were already trickling out of the house in uneasy clumps. Not a party anymore. A quiet evacuation. Eyes avoided ours, but I could feel them. The glances. The murmurs already forming in whispers that would sweep through Greenwich by morning. The Wilsons, once the definition of old money, tradition, and power, had just been wrecked from the inside. Not by a rival, but by the son they never believed in. As we reached the car, a man broke from the crowd and walked toward us. Tall, impeccably dressed. Sharp eyes. Marcus Thorne, CEO of Thorne, Consolidated. A man whose name carried weight. A longtime competitor of my father's. He had been at the main table. He had seen it all. Mr. Wilson, he said, his voice a rich baritone. Even, calm, not with pity, but something else, something calculating. Interested. Mr. Thorne? I replied, returning the calm. He glanced back at the house, expression unreadable but definitely unimpressed. Then he turned back to me. I've been looking to diversify my capital partners for a while now. Meridian's been on my radar. He paused, let the words breathe. And after seeing how you handled a fundamental breach of good faith, I'm impressed. That took courage. He reached into his jacket and handed me a business card. Simple, crisp, heavy. My office will be in touch Monday morning, he said. I think you and I have a lot to talk about. I took the card. It felt like it weighed 10 pounds in my hand. Not just paper. Promise. I look forward to it, I said. He gave one sharp nod and walked away. David exhaled the breath he'd apparently been holding since dessert. Did that just happen? It did, I said, still staring at the card. It wasn't just opportunity. It was validation. A recognition from a peer. A signal that what I did wasn't a tantrum, it was a move. Strategic, decisive, and right. The drive home was quiet. My phone started buzzing before we hit the freeway. Michael? Then my mother? Then Michael again. I let them all go to voicemail. I didn't want to hear excuses. Or rage. Not now. Later that night, David and I sat in the living room, barely speaking, just breathing. Then the house phone rang. An old landline we almost never used. Only a few people even had that number. One of them was my father. David looked at me. Nodded. You should answer it. Get it over with? I picked up the receiver. Hello, James! His voice exploded from the other end. Like a bomb going off in my ear. A voice I hadn't heard since I was a teenager. Denting his Mercedes. What have you done? Do you have a NY idea what you've done? I pulled the phone away. Waited until the rage burned out enough for words to fit. I know exactly what I've done, I said, flat and calm. You've ruined us. Ruined this family. For what? Because you had to sit at a different table? A childish insult. No, Dad. My voice didn't rise, but it didn't waver either. I did it because for 38 years, you treated me like I didn't matter. You ignored my passions, laughed at my ambitions. Tonight wasn't some isolated insult. It was a summary. A thesis statement for a lifetime of disrespect. He stammered. You're my son. Am I? I asked. Because tonight, I didn't feel like your son. I felt like a business liability you were embarrassed to be seen with. I paused, then drove the truth home. So I acted. Like a businessman? You and Michael broke the terms of the loan. You acted in bad faith. So I exercised my legal right. It's that simple. His anger cracked into desperation. His voice changed. I heard something I'd never heard from him before. Pleading. James, please, you can't do this. The company Wilson Properties, it'll collapse. My legacy, our family's legacy, it'll be gone. And there it was. Not about me. Never had been. His legacy. I closed my eyes, took a breath. The same words he'd used earlier returned to me. A legacy is more than buildings, Dad. It's built on respect, on integrity, on character. Then came the final boundary. When you figure out what those words mean, maybe we can talk. But my business with Wilson Properties and with US, done. Goodbye. I hung up. The silence in our house didn't feel heavy. It felt clean, like air after a storm. I stood still for a long moment. I was free. The next 6 months flew by. Everything shifted. Fast forward mode. My partnership with Marcus Thorne was transformative. Meridian's nimble financing. Song consolidated development muscle. We became a powerhouse. We started acquiring the distressed assets Wilson Properties was forced to sell. Not out of revenge, but because they were smart investments. We turned every one of their failing projects into profitable ones. 6 months later, Meridian Financial was on the cover of Forbes. The headline: The New King of Real Estate Finance. How James Wilson's Meridian is redefining the game. There was a photo of me and Marcus shaking hands in front of a newly finished luxury building. A building that had once been a stalled, bleeding project on my father's books. The irony. He always